Let's call it what it is, family. 2024 was the year the power dynamic in American politics finally shifted, and the Democratic Party learned for the first time in decades what it means to lose the trust of its most loyal bloc, Black voters, especially foundational Black Americans. The media can spin it, the think tanks can overanalyze it, and the DNC can keep acting surprised, but the numbers are clear as day and the receipts are ironclad. Let's walk through the real story in Georgia and North Carolina, because no matter how you slice it, the Black vote decided this election by deciding not to show up. Start with Georgia, the so-called crown jewel of Black political muscle. The state has about 2.25 million registered Black voters, a number the party loves to brag about on cable news. But this year, that muscle flexed by staying home. According to the Georgia Secretary of State's official post-election report and exit polling from Pew, the number of Black voters who cast a ballot in 2024 was roughly 1.52 million, including early voting, absentee, and day of numbers. That's a turnout rate of around 67%, down sharply from the 2020 record-breaking surge, which hovered near 78%. That means about 730,000 Black Georgians, all registered, all eligible, opted out. To put that in context, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris carried Georgia in 2020 by just 11,779 votes. In 2024, the margin for Harris was a Trump win by nearly 40,000, yet the number of missing Black ballots was almost 20 times that. For every one undecided suburban voter, there were dozens of Black Georgians sitting on their power and watching from home. Let's go deeper. Break the number down by age. Black voters under 35, especially men, had the sharpest drop in turnout, a 17% decline versus 2020. That's not a youth problem, that's a policy problem. Among older Black women, turnout slipped as well, down 7%. Black men's turnout in Georgia was only 59%, a historic low for a presidential cycle in the state. In urban centers like Atlanta and Savannah, early vote enthusiasm cratered. In rural Black counties like Hancock and Doherty, the Souls to the Polls operations saw record low Sunday numbers. This wasn't about lack of access. Polling places in majority Black counties actually increased by 4% from 2020 to 2024, according to the ACLU. This was a conscious, collective decision. Now North Carolina, which pundits called Harris's firewall after 2020. The state has about 1.55 million registered Black voters. In 2024, 1,018,521 Black voters cast ballots, putting turnout at 66%. Compare that to 2020's 75% Black turnout. So about 530,000 registered Black voters in North Carolina didn't show. Let's get granular. Wake County, home to Raleigh, had a Black turnout drop of 11 percentage points. Mecklenburg County, Charlotte, saw a 14-point slide among Black male voters. Black women in North Carolina still turned out more than Black men, 72% to 60%, but both rates dropped significantly. Early voting fell off too. Only 56% of Black North Carolinians used early voting, down from 64% in 2020. Why does this matter? The margin of defeat for Harris in North Carolina was 62,000 votes, almost 10 times less than the number of missing Black ballots. And the exit polls confirm it. Black voters in both states listed lack of trust in Democrats to deliver on promises as the #1 reason for sitting out. Not apathy, not voter suppression, just a straight-up lack of ROI on the vote. Let's be clear, family. That's a strategic move. That's economic thinking applied to the political marketplace. Some more hard facts. Pew's post-election analysis showed that 28% of Black men in Georgia and 33% in North Carolina said their top reason for not voting was Democrats have failed to address core Black issues. Among Black voters under 30, that number was 41% in Georgia. More than 70% of those who stayed home said they would have considered voting if the party offered direct reparations or Black-targeted wealth-building policy. Even the registration numbers tell the story. In both states, Black voter registration stayed steady from 2020 to 2024. No big purges, no waves of people dropping off the rolls. This wasn't about barriers to entry. It was a boycott, plain and simple. Altogether, over 1.2 million Black voters in Georgia and North Carolina who were registered and eligible chose not to cast a ballot. That's not a margin of error. That's a tidal wave. And you better believe when Black folks decide to stay home, the earth shakes in every campaign office across the country. That's what happened in 2024. Not confusion, not outside manipulation, just Black people finally demanding a tangible return for the vote and willing to sit it out until the product is delivered. Now let's get real, because the political earthquake that shook the Democrats in 2024 didn't come from think tank offices or DC-based black policy organizations with old connections to party insiders. This movement came straight from the ground: the barbershops, the hair salons, the churches that never saw a campaign check, the community centers holding political education meetings, and most of all, the new generation of foundational black Americans who realized nobody was coming to save us but us. These are the voices that gave birth to the no tangibles, no vote doctrine, not because it was trendy, but because it was necessary. And this year, it wasn't Cobra, NARC, or ADOS leading the call. It was grassroots FBA activists, local business owners, young educators, digital organizers, and the millions of black folks who refused to play the loyalty game without results. Let's talk receipts. In 2024, black voters, especially FBAs, wanted more than representation. They wanted reparations, targeted policy, and real, measurable outcomes. In Georgia, neighborhood town halls led by FBA educators in Atlanta, Macon, and Albany were packed, not with nonprofit leaders, but with everyday people tired of promises. They broke down exactly what reparations should look like: direct payments, land grants, black business development, and debt cancellation. And when DNC surrogates rolled into town with coalition messaging or photo ops, the rooms emptied out fast. Social media, especially Black Twitter and new FBA-focused platforms, was ablaze with "cut the check" and "no tangibles, no vote," hashtags that didn't need a blue check or an NGO's blessing. In North Carolina, true grassroots showed up in block parties, student unions at HBCUs, and kitchen table meetings across Charlotte, Durham, and rural counties. Local FBA activists created digital toolkits on how to vet candidates, demand black-targeted policy, and organize boycotts. In Raleigh, an FBA-owned bookstore hosted voter disobedience workshops, not telling people to stay home, but to demand more for their vote and never trade it for symbolism. The word was clear: we are not marching for free. You want our vote? Bring receipts. Meanwhile, what did the Democratic Party offer? More symbolic gestures, more equity roundtables, and a parade of celebrities sent to do last-minute damage control. FBAs saw through it. Every promise to study reparations was met with, "We already did our homework. Where's your report card?" Instead of direct action, the DNC kept talking about minority small business grants and access to credit, while grassroots organizers asked for what every other group gets: targeted cash, repair, and restoration. This year, FBA activism was everywhere. Local leaders created Black voter withholding pledge drives, where community members publicly declared they would not vote unless a candidate supported a real reparations plan. Influential podcasts, YouTube channels, and TikTokers produced daily receipts, data, policy breakdowns, and plain talk about the cost of loyalty with no return. They highlighted not only the failures of the national party, but also the importance of local power, running for school board, organizing mutual aid, and supporting Black-owned businesses as a political act. Exit polling showed the results. In Georgia, 81% of Black voters under 35 who didn't vote said they were waiting for tangible policy, not more speeches. In North Carolina, a stunning 70% of Black non-voters said a real reparations bill would have brought them to the polls. The largest organizing coalition was a loose network of FBA activists who never even set foot in a Beltway conference room. And when National Party insiders panicked, trying to patch things up with another Black Economic Agenda webinar or Coalition Week, FBA leaders went back to the basics: block parties, political education nights, financial literacy workshops, and relentless voter education about how policy is power. No amount of national branding could match the authenticity and trust these local leaders built with their own people. The truth? Kamala Harris, Fani Willis, and every blue state Democrat felt the chill, not because legacy Black orgs wrote another open letter, but because regular Black voters, the everyday FBA backbone, made the ultimate strategic move. They withheld their vote, not out of spite, but as a flex of real political power. This time, there was no confusion, no backroom deals, no hollow endorsements, just a message for all of Washington: deliver for us or watch us stay home. No more free rides. The result was seismic. Black turnout cratered in neighborhoods the party once called guaranteed. The so-called blue wall crumbled, not because of the right wing, not because of bots, but because FBAs took control of their own destiny. When the Democrats tried to pass the blame, the grassroots receipts were already on the table. That's the new order, and it's only getting stronger. Reparations is not just a talking point, it's the standard. If you want the Black vote, you deal directly with the people, not the professional gatekeepers. FBAs have made it plain. This is not about representation, but restoration, and the era of blind loyalty is officially over. Now let's dissect what has to be one of the Democratic Party's most expensive and most spectacular political flops in modern history, the Immigration Coalition gamble. For years, party strategists whispered behind closed doors that if black voter enthusiasm ever started to slip, the party could simply broaden the tent, that new arrivals, immigrant communities, and other emerging majorities would be registered, naturalized, and mobilized to fill the gap. But family, when the numbers came in for 2024, that tent didn't just fail to cover the base, it collapsed, leaving the House in shambles and the DNC scrambling for answers. Here are the receipts. In Georgia, Democratic organizers invested more in immigrant voter outreach than at any point in the state's history. By Election Day, the DNC and partner orgs had poured over $25 million into Spanish, Korean, Vietnamese, and African immigrant registration drives, multilingual phone banking, and translated get-out-the-vote efforts. But the numbers told the real story. Of the roughly 280,000 new U.S. citizens in Georgia between 2020 and 2024, only 45% registered and less than 30% turned out to vote. That's fewer than 40,000 votes net for Democrats. Meanwhile, over 730,000 black voters sat out. For every new coalition ballot, there were nearly 20 FBA votes missing. In North Carolina, it was the same script, different channel. Immigrant and new American voter engagement programs cost over $12 million. State records show just under 120,000 naturalized citizens eligible to vote in 2024. Registration was up from 2020, but only about 48,000 of those new voters turned out. Meanwhile, more than 530,000 black North Carolinians said, "No tangibles, no vote." The party's dream that they could swap one loyal base for another crashed into reality. There is no substitute for black political power, especially when that power is organized and withholding. Let's dig deeper. National exit polling by Edison Research showed that while first-generation immigrant voters in Georgia and North Carolina skewed Democratic, their turnout lagged behind not only black voters, but also white, Asian American, and Latino U.S.-born citizens. In fact, the immigrant surge was mostly hype. While some districts saw new energy, it was nowhere near enough to make up for the historic black exodus from the polls. But here's where the DNC really misread the playbook. The strategy was never about building real cross-community solidarity. It was about political arithmetic, hoping new voters would fill a quota while ignoring the demands of the original base. When FBA organizers saw this, they went straight to the grassroots, holding forums in Atlanta's West End, Charlotte's Beatty's Ford Corridor, and Durham's South Side, breaking down in plain language how the party was investing more in immigrant outreach than in black reparations. The message stuck. We're not against anybody coming to this country, but don't try to replace us with new numbers while our repair is still overdue. Social media receipts piled up. Viral videos and meme campaigns showed side-by-side maps of investment, millions for new American registration, but almost nothing for black business grants, housing repair, or direct cash payments to descendants of enslaved Africans. The phrase, "you can't coalition your way out of FBA neglect," trended in Atlanta, Charlotte, and across black Twitter. In interviews, black elders and young voters alike said, "We see the hustle. Y'all spending money to bring in new folks, but you never cut a check for the people who built the house." The party's bet was also undermined by cold, hard numbers. Of the new immigrant voters who did turn out in both states, exit polls showed over a quarter split their ballots down ticket or didn't support every Democratic candidate. Meanwhile, among black voters who did show up, 92% voted straight Democratic. The DNC gambled big and lost bigger. In the aftermath, the Democratic National Committee tried to spin the story, blaming voter suppression, disinformation, or Republican dirty tricks. But the evidence was public. The party's own field organizers admitted to Politico that without the black base, no coalition is enough to win Georgia or North Carolina. No matter how big the tent, if you neglect the foundation, the whole thing falls. What did FBAs do instead? While the DNC chased the new American dream, true grassroots organizers doubled down on FBA turnout education, policy forums, and vote withholding pledges. In Atlanta, more than a dozen FBA-owned radio stations, podcast networks, and independent platforms blasted the message: no more politics as usual. Local churches, business groups, and even black sororities and fraternities hosted events called The Value of Our Vote, teaching people not to be afraid of sitting out until a real policy offer is made. The Democrats, blinded by data models and coalition wishful thinking, missed the truth. FBAs are not just the base. We are the foundation. When we don't show up, the house falls, the tent rips, and no emerging majority can save you if you refuse to pay what you owe. So in 2024, while the party bet billions on the craps table of immigration turnout, FBAs calmly held their chips and watched the dealers sweep the table clean. Lesson learned if the party's listening. The only way forward is through, not around, the black vote. Now let's lay it all out, family, because what happened in 2024 was more than a protest, more than a boycott, more than a viral moment. It was a full-scale policy shift driven by foundational Black Americans and true grassroots voters who've been on the front lines for generations. The message, no tangible, no vote, wasn't just a hashtag. It was a contract signed in real time by over 1.2 million Black registered voters in Georgia and North Carolina alone, and the aftershocks are only beginning to reshape American politics from the bottom up. The narrative spun by legacy media is that Black voters are apathetic, disengaged, or waiting to be inspired. But anybody who's listening on the ground knows the truth. Black voters are more sophisticated, more politically educated, and more economically strategic than ever. This was a collective, intentional move, not a fluke or an accident. For decades, Black folks were told, if you don't vote, you can't complain. But now, FBAs are flipping the script. If you don't deliver, don't even ask. It's a policy-based approach that centers tangible gains, not promises or pageantry. First, let's talk about what tangible really means. Tangibles aren't symbolic gestures, celebrity endorsements, or photo ops at HBCUs. Tangibles are concrete policy, direct reparations, cash payments, Black business investment, targeted housing grants, Black land restoration, criminal justice reform that puts dollars and safety back in Black hands, school funding that closes the achievement gap, student loan cancellation that actually hits the Black borrower pipeline, and ironclad legal protections that cannot be undone by a single executive order. Tangibles are policies you can see, touch, measure, and build on, not words you hear right before Election Day. In 2024, the grassroots FBA movement made sure every candidate, campaign staffer, and allies knew what was required. Voter education sessions, viral social media campaigns, and community radio hosts spelled it out. No more lift every voice and sing at rallies while budgets go everywhere but Black America. No more we'll look into it when asked about reparations. No more broad-based solutions that dilute the very repair owed to the group that built the nation for free. Every no tangible, no vote conversation became a syllabus for a new political literacy, one where Black voters know their value and the price of their turnout. Let's be specific. In the months leading up to Election Day 2024, more than 180 grassroots FBA voter forums were held across Georgia and North Carolina. Community leaders, activists, youth organizers, and everyday working folks broke down policy, reviewed receipts, and agreed on non-negotiables. The word spread faster than any DNC ad could buy. We're not the silent generation, and we're not loyal for nothing. In major cities, rural counties, and suburban towns, Black voters posted pledge cards, wore no tangible, no vote t-shirts, and called in to talk radio to make their stance public. It became both a warning and an invitation. Deliver for us or keep it moving. Meanwhile, Democrats and consultants kept pushing old tricks, hoping Barack Obama, Oprah, or a viral video could fire up the base. But the era of hope without a policy offer is dead. Kamala Harris learned that the hard way. Nationally, Black turnout declined by the largest margin in a presidential election since 2000. But the drop wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It was an intentional act of power, as much a form of political engagement as voting itself. It was a public demonstration of leverage, a reminder that, in a country where elections are decided by tens of thousands, millions of missing Black ballots are a tidal wave that drowns any candidate without a plan. So what does this mean for 2026 and 2028? First, candidates who want to court Black America must start by building real policy partnerships with grassroots FBA leaders, not with gatekeeping legacy orgs or DNC-appointed advisors. Policy forums, draft bills, budget proposals, and implementation plans need to have FBA fingerprints on every page, not just input, but co-authorship. In places like Georgia, local activists are already planning candidate debates with reparations, Black homeownership, and wealth transfer as the first three questions. In North Carolina, FBA women's groups and student coalitions have outlined a Black policy scorecard, grading politicians on past performance and future pledges. If you want a ground game, bring receipts. Second, every campaign strategy has to plan for a turnout gap if they don't deliver tangible policy. Persuasion is not enough. FBAs have learned that withholding the vote is a power move. The message for 2026 and 2028 is not go vote, It's here's what your vote gets you in writing before you show up. Every primary, every special election, every runoff is now an opportunity for grassroots leverage. If Black voters see nothing but speeches and symbolic gestures, don't expect good trouble at the polls. Expect silence. Third, the digital and media landscape is changing. Traditional Black media is still important, but the true organizing is happening on YouTube, Black Twitter, TikTok, Telegram, WhatsApp, and new FBA-run platforms. That means national parties, PACs, and campaigns can't just buy the Black vote with ad dollars. They have to earn trust in spaces they don't control. FBAs are swapping information, breaking down candidate records, and organizing across state lines without a single check from the establishment. That decentralized energy is the new superpower. Fourth, it's not just about the federal level. The no tangible, no vote movement is flowing into state, county, and city politics. In Atlanta, FBA organizers are already vetting mayoral and council candidates for reparations support. In Charlotte and Durham, activists are working on local Black business investment bills. School boards, DA races, even sheriff's offices. Every ballot matters, and if tangibles aren't delivered, the grassroots will let it be known with their silence. And finally, let's be clear about what happens if this lesson is ignored. The Democratic Party, or any party, can try to build a new coalition, spend millions on outreach, or lean on nostalgia for the movement. But if the receipts don't add up, the drought will only spread. The Black base is not angry. It's awakened, strategic, and ready to negotiate from a position of power. The political contract has changed. No tangible, no vote is now the baseline. The old days of emotional appeals are over. The only thing left is the offer on the table. So to every candidate, party chair, strategist, and influencer, the path to victory in 2026 and 2028 runs through real Black policy. The margin of victory will be counted not just in votes, but in policy lines, budget numbers, and signatures on real reparations bills. Don't show up in our neighborhoods unless you're ready to close the deal. If you do, the reward is the most loyal, effective, and strategic base in American history. If you don't, prepare for another election night filled with shock, spin, and what happened headlines. This is LaSherika telling you the Black vote has moved into the 21st century, and we're not coming back. If you want the future, you've got to pay the cost to be the boss. No tangible, no vote. Full stop.